Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I'm going back to one of my favorite subjects, Bigfoot, and in one of my favorite areas, the Adirondacks. If you guys caught our episode last week, John and I did another horror movie episode. We did Jaws ripoffs. And one of the movies we were talking about was Lake Placid with Bill Pullman and Bridget Fonda, Oliver Platt. Really good movie. And we just kept mentioning Lake Placid a lot last week, even though the movie doesn't take place in Lake Placid, New York. They say in the movie they wanted to name the lake that they're on, which I believe is called Black Lake Placid, but it was already taken. It's a little wink and a nod to the real Lake Placid in New York. And I've never been to Lake Placid. I've been to the Adirondacks many times, but never to Lake Placid. I've never been up that way. It's like north of Whitehall, but there are a lot of Bigfoot sightings. But the area around Lake Placid, near Lake Placid, has a lot of Bigfoot activity. So I thought this week we'd take a look at some of that stuff because I have Lake Placid on the brain. And if you guys are familiar with the show, you know how my mind works. I just, every week there seems to be something that says, oh, I want to do a show on this. So there's my inspiration for this week. Just lots of Lake Placid. Last week, I said, let me talk about some Bigfoot sightings there because there's some pretty cool ones. There's one in here I'm going to kind of pick apart. I try to do that in every Bigfoot episode. I mean, sometimes I stick to ones that I can't debunk, and sometimes there's a lot that I can debunk, and people don't always like the debunking, but it has to be done. And there's a story in here that I'm a little bit iffy on, and I don't debunk it completely, but there's some details in there that I don't like, and I wish the BFRO had addressed that. And before we get to that, when I do these episodes, I get a lot of comments from people or emails, and they're angry because they don't like the BFRO. It's not really directed at me, but they're just basically saying the BFRO is terrible and they shouldn't be trusted. And I tend to agree to a certain degree because I do think they perhaps cherry pick things. I mean, every sighting that is on their database, they're saying, oh, the witness was credible and we believe it was a Bigfoot. That you don't see a lot of debunking from them. And I wish they would do that more. And I understand they may not want to clutter the database with clearly not Bigfoot sightings, because I'm sure there's a lot of them out there. And I think some of the people who are complaining are perhaps people who have submitted a report that really didn't meet the criteria to be included in the database. And now they're angry about that because they're saying, oh, Matt Moneymaker and BFRO are picking and choosing and they're not really being fair. None of us really knows. We don't work for the organization. I know some people who have, and they have varying things to say about the BFRO, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm just simply taking stories that people have submitted, and like I do with every show, I kind of analyze them from a skeptical point of view and see where I fall. But I approach everything initially from a skeptical point of view, and then we let the evidence kind of bring us to where we end up. And do we believe it? Is it credible? Is it not so much? But there's some good stories in here tonight. Like I said, just one that I'm going to kind of poke a few holes in, and no disrespect to the witness, but there's certain things that like a quick Google search will help you with. And if you don't do that, it's a Bigfoot. If you do that, the probability is significantly reduced. So let us get into some cool Bigfoot sightings in Lake Placid. All right. So the first story this week was submitted by a witness named Walter Morse. And this happened in 2022. So fairly recent sighting, just a few years ago. And this happened in Essex County, May 30th of 2022. And the location details, it says here the witness can't precisely pinpoint the spot on the road where he saw this figure. But he got pretty close when he was talking to the BFRO. The nearest town is Keeseville, New York. Nearest road is Auger Lake Road. And he says it was about 3:20 in the afternoon on this date, driving east on Dugway Road in Chesterfield, New York, in Essex County. The weather was sunny. Road was shady in spots. He observed a tall and black Sasquatch standing on the left side of the road next to a large white pine tree, possibly 300 feet ahead of his car. Said to myself, what the hell? It was going down the hill. I stopped, got out, and searched for prints or maybe catch a smell, found nothing, smelled nothing. Clocked mileage next to the road intersection with the Auger Lake Road to be about a little over a mile. Went back and scoured around a little bit more, but did not find anything I can report. Also noticed the creature bolted so fast downslope towards the Ausable River through heavy woods. Sighting only lasted a few seconds. No other witnesses. Other stories, he says, not here, but I have followed the reports in Port Henry, Ticonderoga area some years ago. And this was on a paved road. So let's get into the follow-up investigation, and then I'll give my thoughts on this one. So this was done by Matt Moneymaker. He does the follow-up investigation here. Eyewitness Walter Morris is a 79-year-old retired land surveyor. He worked as a land surveyor for decades in New Hampshire before retiring to Port Kent, New York. Even though the figure was approximately 300 feet away, it was very visible next to the large tree. He focused on it clearly for a few seconds before it moved out of view. He is certain that it could not have been a bear or any other type of animal, or nor a human. He is confident and believable that it was a Sasquatch. I don't know what he means by that. Walter is known to the BFRO because he attended a BFRO expedition in British Columbia in 2016. He took turns monitoring the display screen for the car roof-mounted thermal camera as the group drove along the squatchy western shore of Harrison Lake for a few nights. He is an older guy, but has a good eye, and he was certainly not prone to seeing Sasquatch-shaped illusions in the woods. He says the fur of this Sasquatch was basically black. He saw it turn and quickly descend down the wooded slope and out of view in the direction of the Ausable River. He clearly saw it had long arms as it turned away to flee from view of the approaching vehicle. As far as we know, no one has ever done any Bigfoot investigations in this area. Right now, so summer of 2022, would be a good time to look for tracks along the banks and sandbars near the oxbow of the river. So this one is a very quick, fleeting glimpse of something. He sees the long arms. It's running very quickly downhill. So again, I think we can rule out a human. This is not a guy in a ghillie suit or a gorilla suit. As I've said many times on this show, walking through even really well-maintained trails in the Adirondacks can be taxing, especially if you got a lot of weight on you. If you're wearing a ghillie suit or a gorilla suit, it's not easy to traverse even, some of the easier trails in the Adirondacks. And you talk about downhill. Going downhill is very tough for a human being. So I think we can rule that out. Could it have been a bear? Possibly. It's said that this is an older gentleman. He's worked with the BFRO before. So did he have Bigfoot on the brain? Possibly, because he says when he saw it, he kind of pulled over and went back and went to look for prints, went to look for smells, and found nothing. So not discounting this one. And I don't think that, if you are into Bigfoot, that automatically discredits your sighting, because it doesn't. In many ways, it could enhance your perception. But it's a fleeting sighting. It's daytime, so I think that is a plus for this sighting. But yeah, a cool sighting, quick, just a black Sasquatch running downhill. Couldn't have been a person. I would think that this guy would know what a bear looks like. And again, we hate the bear explanation from the skeptics that they always say it was probably a bear. So this one is pretty cool. Fleeting, not the greatest sighting, but it's recent. And he saw the long arms, and this thing ran downhill, which humans can't really do. So cool story. I like this one. Okay, so story number 2. This was submitted in March of 2020, but it took place August 6th of 2010. Camper describes morning sighting at Cascade Lake near Lake Placid. So there we got Lake Placid. And I've heard this account before on another podcast, the 46 of 46 podcast. Really cool show, but I've heard this story before, but it's a really good one. So I just want to talk about this one. This happened at Cascade Lake. The nearest town is Keene. Nearest road, Highway 73, and observed. This was approximately 8 to 8:30 in the morning. Clear weather, few clouds, so morning, sunny. And he says, I spend most of the summers camping in and around the Adirondacks in my Dodge Caravan. This particular summer, I had stopped at Cascade Lake to spend a few days camping. I had slept soundly the previous night and had woken up around 7 a.m. I decided to get up and start making my breakfast. I just started the kettle on the camp stove when I looked over at Upper Cascade Lake and can see the mist rising off the surface of the lake. I grabbed my iPhone and walked about 50 yards to the edge of the lake to get a picture. As I approached the breakwall, I noticed a dark brown object on the opposite side of the lake at the shore. At first, I couldn't make out what it was, but it seemed to be sitting at the water's edge. I then realized that it must be a bear. The animal looked like it was doing something in the water with its paws, as I could hear a faint splashing sound. I thought it would be a good idea to get a picture, so I brought my phone up to face level and tried to focus in on the animal. As I was focusing in, the animal stood up on two legs. I was startled and pulled down my phone to see this with my own eyes. It took a step backwards to the tree line and stopped. Almost methodically, as it stopped, it turned its whole upper body to the left and stared at me for a couple of seconds. It turned back and in one step disappeared into the tree line. I immediately went cold and got scared. I would have too. As I ran back to my campsite, my only thought was that it was going to go left or right. If it went right, it would have to go into the water. And if it went left, it was headed directly for my campsite. I decided that it was best to get the hell out of Dodge, so to speak. I arrived back at my campsite in under a minute. My dog was still asleep on the front seat and didn't stir at all. I opened the passenger side sliding door of my van and started to throw all of the camping gear back into the van, making quite a mess inside of it as I did. I closed the door and then jumped into the driver's seat and floored the gas to leave. As I was driving out, I kept looking out my left driver's side window to see if I could observe it again, but I saw nothing. I drove all the way into Lake Placid and parked at a mall parking lot to gather my thoughts and think about what had taken place. I was pretty shaken up as I kept replaying the experience over and over in my head, trying to make sense of what I had seen. So, kind of creepy. He says, I cannot ascertain its height exactly because of the distance. It's on the other side of the lake, but I would guess that it was approximately 7 to 8 foot tall. It was covered head to toe in shaggy, dark brown hair or fur. I could see the sunlight shining off its back as it turned to go into the tree line and could see the brown coloration as it turned away from me. When it turned to stare at me, I could not make out any facial features, but I knew that it saw me. The upper body was massive and stocky, like a football player's build. It had very long arms that went well below its waist. I could also make out what I assume were the shape of hands. Oof. It walked upright and paused before slowly turning its upper body to look directly at me. And that's an interesting point because, again, I've mentioned on the show before, Grover Krantz has said this, a human being can just turn their head. Primates, their heads are sunken lower, so they tend to turn their whole upper body. Think of the Patterson-Gimlin footage. It doesn't just turn its neck, it turns its whole upper body to look at the camera. So very, very strange. He continues, it stared at me for approximately 5 to 10 seconds and turned back to face the tree line. It took 1 to 2 steps and disappeared into the forest. I could see a couple of branches move after it went into the trees. It was then that I decided to leave. I did not hear anything other than the initial splashing it made in the water with its hands when I first thought it was a bear. I did not return to the area until 3 years later with a friend to camp. Nothing has happened on subsequent trips to the area of Cascade Lake. I have had 2 other odd experiences in the area of the Adirondacks on other trips. Didn't notice anything else out of the ordinary. He has heard other stories in the area. And there's a little follow-up investigation here by BFRO investigator Mike Young, who says, witness is a retired police officer and police investigator and retired military. His descriptions were very detailed. He enjoys camping in the Adirondacks every summer. So that adds some context. Again, the skeptics will try to tell you people are drunk, people are just not trained observers. They don't know what they're seeing in the woods. It was just a bear. This guy initially thinks it's a bear. He sees something, maybe getting a drink at the water's edge on the other side of the lake and wants to take a picture of it. Cool, there's a bear. And then it stands up. And it doesn't just stand up, it takes a few steps and walks into the tree line, into the woods on 2 legs, which a bear would never do. We've said ad nauseum on the show, bears can stand. They can maybe take a step or two if they're doing an intimidation display, or if they're trying to reach something, food or something on a tree. They don't walk on 2 legs. That's not their preferred mode of travel. And if this was a bear and it was trying to get away from this guy, it's going to drop down to all 4s so it can be as efficient as possible in getting away from this guy. He's ex-cop, ex-military. This is a trained guy. He camps in the Adirondacks every year. This is someone who knows what he's seeing. So I love this story. Just really freaky and we hear this a lot. People see something, they think it's a tree stump, they think it's a bear, and then it stands up and walks away on 2 legs, and that is just freaky. And if I was out there by myself, I would have done the same thing, because where is this thing going? Is it running away, or is it trying to come around the lake to get me? So very cool sighting. I like this one. So story number 3, possible daylight sighting by motorist near Minerva. And this was June 10th, 2006, in Essex County. Location details. The road that passes through Minerva, New York, go north for about 10 miles, Take a left at the North Woods Club Road. It is a public road. I saw the creature about 7 miles in. Observed. On June 10th, 2006, I was driving with my brother on a back road. It was unpaved in the Adirondack Park. We were heading for a trailhead that led into the Hudson River Gorge. I'm going to come back to that. This area is almost dead center in the park, surrounded by many miles of uninhabited and very rugged terrain. Very true. It was late morning on a clear day. I was driving as fast as I could on this road because we had to get back to town by a certain time. As we turned a bend, I saw a very large, brown, furry object lunge into the dense woods up the road at the next curve about 50 yards ahead. It was obvious that the creature was in the road and was startled by my speeding SUV. I told my brother, "Hey, there goes a moose." We reached that spot in about 3 seconds, and I slammed on the brakes, expecting to see the moose right there in the bushes. At that spot, through the bushes, was a decent-sized clearing and then more dark woods that went down a hill. There was nothing there at all. Everything was still. We started off again and took our hike. The more I thought about it, the more I thought it could not have just been a moose. First of all, it was the wrong color, a light chestnut brown. The color was very visible because the sun was shining in the area. It was a striking shade against the light green of the brush. Moose are never that shade. They are always a very dark brown. And we'll come back to that. Second, the size and shape were wrong. This thing was huge, at least 7 feet tall, and the shape was not like a moose rump. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like it was the upper back and head of something. Finally, if it was a moose, it would not have utterly vanished so quickly. My vehicle got to that spot in just seconds. Moose, at least the ones that I have seen, don't tear off into the woods. We should have seen it in the clearing. It wasn't a bear either, not even close. I wished I'd stopped to investigate further. Unfortunately, we were in a hurry. Also noticed, this location is in the middle of a large wilderness. There are practically no roads or trails at all in the area. Some sections of the forest here are completely impassable due to very steep, overgrown terrain. He says, my brother didn't see it. This was late morning. It was a sunny day. Follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Paul Conroy, who says, after an extensive phone interview, the witness provided the following details. The sighting lasted approximately 3 seconds. Using the trees at the location that the creature stood as a base, the witness estimated the animal at 7.5 feet tall and having a color described as chestnut or light brown. As the creature moved away, the witness observed the shoulders and head of the animal. The witness owns a house in the area and is familiar with the native wildlife. The color description and the details provided by the witness regarding how the creature moved seems to rule out a bear. While there are moose in the area, they generally do not move in the smooth and quick manner that was described. When they are disturbed by human activity, they commonly walk away slowly. This area is in the vicinity of the Hudson River Gorge, a part of the Adirondack Mountains known for clean, fast-moving water sources, abundant wildlife, and dense forest with a lot of small cliffs and peaks. So let us analyze this one. First of all, the Hudson River Gorge, we were in that area. Josh and I had camped in that area, and I'll put a link to our episode down below, Bigfoot or Bear, Bear or Bigfoot. We don't know what we saw, but we had an encounter in the Hudson River Gorge. We were at Ross Pond, and we did a whole episode on it. And there's a shorter video that kind of shows us trying to debunk it and trying to figure out what we had seen. But that took place in the Hudson River Gorge, and that was probably the most remote area we've been to yet. We didn't see another person. We didn't see an airplane. It was like another planet. It was very cool. But when we had our experience, that was frightening. And we don't know if it was a bear, if it was a moose or Bigfoot. It just didn't act like a bear, didn't act like a moose. We didn't find any footprints, but we don't know what it was. But it was in the Hudson River Gorge. So that area, I can attest to, is spooky. It's beautiful, but there are a lot of those sort of cliffs, and it was rough going. It was rough for us hiking in there. So just wanted to point that out, and you guys can check out our episode on our Ross Pond Bigfoot encounter. I will put links to that below. This seems like a good sighting. The one thing that bothers me is that he says, the color is wrong, a light chestnut brown. Moose are never that shade. They are always a very dark brown. And a quick Google search will show you that they can be reddish brown as calves to dark brown and almost black as adults. They could be gray or white patches. This says here, moose can range in color from golden brown to almost black, depending on the season and the age of the animal. So yeah, that sort of bothers me. It bothers me that the follow-up investigator did not mention that here. And it doesn't mean this guy didn't see something strange. It doesn't mean that it was definitely a moose, but I don't like those absolute statements. Moose are never that color. Maybe most moose are not that color, but nature always has variations. So you can always have a moose that is more of a chestnut brown, is not that dark brown or black color. So uh, one of my psychology teachers taught me long ago, the only absolutes in life are that there are no absolutes. So, you have to take that into account, that it might not be the preponderance of their colors, but it's possible to have a moose that is that color. So to just say that and be like, it couldn't have been a moose because of the color, that bothers me. So I'm poking a little hole in this story. Again, there's other aspects of it where the moose, the creature that he saw moved very quickly. They couldn't see it in the clearing. But from what he's saying, it does sound almost like he could have seen the rump of a moose. It was a quick sighting. He's driving. It probably was not a direct sighting. He probably kind of caught it out of the corner of his eye. So just wanted to point that out. And again, I'm not trying to debunk the story. I'm not saying it's not Bigfoot, but we have to always do a little bit more research. We can't just take everything at face value. And, that's not how science works. You don't just say, oh, okay, somebody told me that moose are never this color, so I'm going to accept that. Like I said, I did a very quick Google search, and the keywords I used were moose colors. And there's like this little patch here that shows you what colors they can be. And there's lots of articles that pop up talking about the different colors, and they can be a chestnut brown. So again, just be very careful about what you consume and what you believe. And this is why we need to question everything, because some people will read this and say, oh, it couldn't have been a moose because he says moose are never that color. Wrong. So what do you guys think on this one? Do you think he saw a moose, or was it Bigfoot? It doesn't sound like a bear, but I could see how this could possibly be a moose. So let me know what you guys think. Okay, so story number 4. 2 people in canoe see a creature on the shoreline. And this happened August 15th, 1996. Location details: Pine Pond area, can be accessed by old snowmobile bike path that enters from Route 86 in Raybrook. The area is also 1 mile south of Ausable Lake, site of the 2002 ESPN Outdoor Games. It's located at the base of Mount Ampersand. Nearest town is Adirondack Lake. Nearest road, New York Route 86. And observed. In August of 1996, myself and 6 friends were camping at Pine Pond Road in the lower Saranac Lake region. It was around dusk, and my friend and I were fishing in our canoe. The other members of our party were at a camp preparing supper, about a quarter mile away through the forest from our location on the canoe in the middle of the lake. So friends were, on shore making dinner. My friend and I were speaking openly, not attempting to be quiet in any way. I was scanning the northern bank of the lake, which I knew quite well, when I noticed a strange shape on the edge of the woodline. It was about 50 yards away. Immediately, I pointed it out to my friend, and he spotted it instantly. The shape was about 3.5 feet off the ground at its highest point. At first, we both thought it was a black bear standing broadside, but after a few seconds, I realized that was not the case. We started to row towards it, somewhat cautiously. Just as my friend whispered, "It's a bear," the thing stood up. So again, we have this, they think it's a bear, and then it stands up. It had been crouching there on its feet like a catcher from a baseball team. It was about 7 feet tall and was very dark brown in color. Its face was hairy yet fleshy around the upper cheeks. Its eyes were dark in color but clearly visible and had a brightness about them. Upon talking afterwards, we both agreed that we saw slight movements of its head and hands. So again, is it like cocking its head? Is it moving its hands? It's almost like it sees them and maybe trying to figure them out. It stood there for what seemed like 10 seconds looking at us. It tilted its head slightly up as if it were sniffing the air. As if all this wasn't strange enough, we then heard the snapping twigs about 50 feet behind it. The creature turned its torso, so again, not its head, it turned its whole torso to the left and looked to its side. It immediately turned back towards us and then spun 180 degrees around and darted into the woods like a cat. We then heard the sound of movement for about 10 more seconds, then we heard nothing. To this day, I have no idea what made the noise behind it. After staying put in the canoe for about 10 minutes, my friend decided, against my wishes, to paddle to the spot on shore and investigate for tracks. There were only 2 discernible markings in the sand, which were obscured from the pivoting of its feet when it turned around. The whole experience was very, very upsetting. Although I can honestly say it did not attempt to threaten us in any way, it was scary as hell. That night, I did not sleep one wink because I was so focused on every little noise that I heard. I don't blame you. The next day, we left. The other people in our party are convinced we saw a bear. It was no bear. So it's just him and his friend. This was about 8 o'clock at night, well into the dusk period. Sun was below the horizon, but the sky was still illuminated. It had been a typical clear, sunny summer day. So interesting. And I'm going to go through the follow-up investigation here by BFRO investigator Paul Mateja. And he says, the witness and a friend were in a canoe fishing when they saw a dark object approximately 50 yards away along the northwest shoreline of Pine Pond. They thought it was a bear and started to row towards it. When they had closed the distance to about 40 feet, the creature stood up. They immediately realized it was not a bear, stopped rowing, and paddled backwards. Smart. They observed it for about 25 seconds. However, details of the creature's appearance were rather vague because it was standing in the shadows and light levels were low at that time of day. The report states that it was about 7 feet tall, but in retrospect, the witness believes it was a little bit less than that. It was very similar in size and moved in a fashion similar to the creature seen in the Patterson film. The witness is not sure what was making the noise behind the creature. It did not seem alarmed by the noise, but rather seemed to know what it was, and it was at this point it turned and left. Pine Pond is about 10 miles from Lake Placid, host of the 1932 and 1980 Winter Olympic Games. So here we have another very similar story to story number 2, where on a lake, we're at a lake, something is at the shoreline. The witness believes it to be a bear. Then it stands up on 2 legs. It doesn't just rear up and then go back down. It rears up and then walks into the forest on 2 legs, which bears do not do. Was this a guy in a gorilla suit? Possibly, but that explanation, just like the bear explanation, bothers me because you would have to be out of your mind to go into the Adirondacks dressed as in a gorilla suit and not expect to get shot to death. Like, people hunt, even if they're not hunting, most people carry some sort of weapon, firearms, to protect themselves from bears, from other animals, from other people. So most people, I feel, are armed, or there's a high probability that they are armed. If, not everybody takes guns up there, but you'd have to be insane to wear a gorilla suit up there, or a ghillie suit, and just kind of stand out in the open. You probably want to have someone with you to kind of let people know, like, I am not Bigfoot, I'm just a hunter looking for my prey. So very freaky. Again, just similar behavior in the same county, many years apart, just this thing at the shoreline, standing up and walking into the woods. Interesting that they heard stuff in the woods. So was that another creature? Because they said it didn't seem startled by it. It didn't seem upset by it. It just kind of heard it, gave them another look, and then just walked into the woods as if to kind of like, as if the other one was saying, hey, come on, let's go. They saw you. Let's go before they get a blurry picture of you. So this is a very cool story. I heard this one on the 46 of 46 podcast as well, but it's on the BFRO website. I will link to everything below so you guys can find these for yourselves. But this is an interesting one. Bears don't crouch like a catcher on a baseball team. That's what bipeds do. So again, it sounds like it was maybe rummaging for something, stood up, and then walked away. Very cool story. I really like this one. All right, so one more story for this episode. Possible sighting by motorist at night outside Westport. So I think this is the first one we're dealing with that's a nighttime sighting. Most of them have been during the day. So this happened October 5th of 2002, and the nearest town is Mineville. Nearest road is Route 9 N22. Observed. It was approximately 12:45 a.m. Me and my friend Travis, who lives on the end of Pelfishier Road outside of Westport on Route 22, we were heading towards my house in Mineville, and I was a little bit ahead of him. And as I passed Cheney Road, I saw something run out in front of me. It was very large, very fast, and it was running with its 2 legs and one hand out in front and seemed to be carrying something with the other. Weird. Other witnesses, none. So I guess his friend didn't see it. He was, out in the lead there. He says, other stories. Yes, there have been many sightings on this road and in the nearby area. Time was 12:45 a.m. It was very dark, slightly foggy, and barely sprinkling. There's no follow-up investigation for this one, but this is a typical road crossing story. Driving home, nighttime. It's carrying something. He couldn't see what it was. Was it a deer? Was it a dog? Who knows? But a very classic roadside sighting. It moved very fast. It was very large. and he says it was running on two legs. So again, a bear cannot run on two legs. It could barely walk on two legs, and it's not going to run across a road while carrying something over its shoulder with only one arm. I mean, a black bear cannot do that. So another cool story. Not a lot of detail here, but I like these stories where they're not embellished, and it's just I saw something cross the road and it was on two legs and it was carrying something. My headlights kind of hit it and I saw it and then it was gone. Spooky story. So yeah, what do you guys think of this one? Classic roadside. I like those stories. And again, as Scott and I always talk about, why do they see the headlights coming and then run? I could almost understand if it was chasing something. If you see a deer run out and then this bipedal thing kind of chasing the deer, like, yeah, that's its food. It's going to be maybe going to risk being seen for a brief millisecond in order to eat that night and survive. But if it's already got this thing over its shoulder, it's got its meal. Why is it crossing the road in front of this car? Very strange. All right, everybody, let me know what you guys think of these stories. I love Adirondack stories because I love the Adirondacks. It's like my second home, or I want it to be. I love camping up there. I love going up there. And hopefully I can get up there again soon. But it's really cool. And I like that these stories share commonalities. These are sightings. These are people seeing something. A couple of the stories, they're very clearly seeing something. They're seeing what they think is a bear. They're not thinking Bigfoot. They're just saying, oh, look, there's a bear. Let's get closer. Or let me take a picture. And then it stands up and starts walking on two legs. That is freaky. So cool stories here. But again, everybody, we have to question everything. The moose thing, that kind of irks me. And I can understand the witness maybe not knowing, but if you're an investigator with the BFRO, you have to check every detail. And we have Google, we have information, we have libraries. Nobody goes to libraries anymore. Go to libraries, read books, go on the internet. You have the world at your fingertips. We have cell phones. Just do a quick Google search, go to the library and just say, hey, can moose be this color? And if it can, that punches a hole in the story. I'm sorry, but it does. Again, not saying it's not Bigfoot, but it reduces that probability a little bit. And you can't just say it was definitely not a moose. It could have been a moose. So leave room for possibilities, everybody, but question everything. And hope you like these stories. Till next time, everybody, rock and roll.